The episode begins with a flashback to Franklin and Irene's first encounter in a bar. A chance pool shot leads to their meeting, and Franklin takes the opportunity to strike up a conversation with Irene. This is how their relationship started. The narrative jumps ahead by roughly 50 years to meet Franklin and Irene, who are now an elderly couple who are incredibly in love. Despite Irene's wheelchair confinement, their love is unwavering. Franklin is outside trying to get a glimpse of the starry sky with him. They go to a shed where they discover an odd door via a secret subterranean tunnel. They enter and are inexplicably propelled as though transported among the stars to an interstellar viewing platform. Over the past year, Franklin has noticed an increasing inclination in Irene to look up at the stars more often. They made 865 visits to their special location overall, with more visits following Irene's fall the year before. Franklin eventually admits, trying to understand her insistence, that he's tired of their frequent trips to the stars and is prepared to give up their covert duty to someone else. But Irene is convinced that they are the only ones who can solve this mystery. In the meantime, Byron, their neighbor, is determined to find out what Franklin and Irene are hiding in their shed because he has suspicions about it. Byron ran to their car as they were leaving early the following morning. However, Franklin found the intrusion annoying and saw him as just another busybody. Later, Franklin completely ignores him as he tries to mow his lawn. When Byron gets home, he talks to his wife Janine about his suspicions. She tells him not to get involved in their neighbor's problems, saying it's none of their business. Irene makes the suggestion that Franklin befriend Byron more while they are in the car, but Franklin rejects it. Irene doesn't give up, telling him to make friends instead of concentrating all of his attention on her. Franklin and Irene later pay a hospital visit. Irene visits her physician, who wants to do some tests because it seems like her symptoms are getting worse, even though it's still unclear what exactly is wrong with her. Franklin went to do some errands while Irene was with the doctor. After that, he received a call from his granddaughter Denise, and they ultimately had lunch together. She has heard from a neighbor that they are out and about in the middle of the night, so she is concerned about them. Franklin justifies it as stargazing while taking walks, but Denise is skeptical. She brings up the subject of them leaving the house because she is concerned. Irene takes advantage of the chance to pay a visit to her longtime friend Sadie at a nursing home while Franklin is away. She is depressed to see Sadie's declining mental health during her visit. Irene confides in Sadie, telling her that she has been on extraordinary journeys, but is also battling a serious illness. Feeling as though she needs to confide in someone, Franklin comes back to pick her up, and they both appear visibly tired, as if the inexorable passage of time is weakening their mental abilities. This is especially clear in the case of Franklin, who is exhibiting signs of senility and forgetting important things, like filling up the car with gas and picking up Irene from the doctor. Excited about his candidacy for councilman, Byron is excitedly showing Janine his new campaign sign at their house. Janine advises him to postpone his campaign until the following year, but Byron is keen to get going. Following their chat, Byron slips over to Irene and Franklin's house to observe. He gets a text from Janine while he's investigating, which makes him leave right away. At home, the subject of death's inevitable outcome comes up. If Irene dies before Franklin, she advises him to make the most of life and think about leaving their house. Franklin and Irene enjoy a nice evening together, and then Franklin starts to sing to her, but quickly nods off. But Irene is agitated and prepared to act. She decides to take charge of her circumstances while she still has the ability, and she writes Franklin a note to that effect. She leaves the note by the chair as she gets ready to leave the house, promising to see him again. They have visited the Martian terrain numerous times together, but Irene plans to go there alone. As she turns to head out, she finds someone unconscious on the ground, gasping for air and pleading for her assistance. Franklin wakes up the following morning to see Irene breathing heavily and crawling toward the house. "There's someone in the shed," she tells him urgently. Franklin looks into it, concerned, reaching for a hammer for protection. He finds a stranger slumped over in agony downstairs. Franklin believes the man is a drug addict looking for safety right away, but Irene feels something is off. The fact that the man has blood all over him, but no visible wounds, adds to the mystery. Franklin decides to call the police because he is worried. Officer Thomas shows up quickly and thoroughly inspects the area to make sure no threats are present right away. As this is going on, the camera slowly pans across Franklin's back to show a splattered patch of blood on his right shoulder from carrying the bloodied stranger. Irene pulls Officer Thomas aside for a private talk as he gets ready to inspect the upper floor. She tells him that Franklin may be seeing things that aren't there and that his mental health is failing. Her intervention persuades the officer, who then departs the property, believing Franklin to be hallucinating the whole ordeal. And the story introduces another subplot. Tony, Stella's daughter, in stark contrast to Tony's usual urban school environment, they are leading llamas across vast rolling hills, far from the hustle and bustle of the city in the tranquil mountains. Tony invites Matthias to their home that evening, thinking that this might be the start of a new friendship. She is unaware of Matthias's ulterior intent, though. Casting a shadow over their encounter, he reveals that he was offered 4,000 pesos to step inside a house that is supposedly haunted because he dared to visit it. Local kids, including Matthias, are curious about the rumors circulating about Tony's grandfather's possible involvement in cult activities. Tony is devastated by this information because he had thought that Matthias's visit was the start of a romantic relationship. Stella swiftly steps in and shoos Tony away after discovering him with Matthias. Stella handles the situation and then sneaks off to the back of a nearby old church. A door that remarkably resembles the one in Franklin and Irene's shed is there, hidden from sight, raising the possibility of a more profound, enigmatic relationship between the two places. Returning to Franklin and Irene, as things at their house get worse, the stranger on their floor faints and begins shaking violently. Irene thinks it might be connected to a virus she previously battled because she recognizes the symptoms from a previous experience. With the hope that it will help, she sends Franklin out to get more Tamiflu right away. Irene seizes the chance to go through the stranger's possessions while Franklin is away. She discovers a bunch of gold coins and a picture marked Gabriel, which raises the possibility of the man's identity or relationship. Irene, who is obviously distressed, decides to take matters into her own hands. In an attempt to calm him with her voice, she makes a homemade remedy that she hopes will lessen his symptoms and starts reading aloud from a book she discovered among his belongings. Byron is out trying to get signatures from the locals in an attempt to garner support for his councilman campaign, but he's having trouble getting any help. Byron spots Franklin walking into the pharmacy and takes advantage of the moment to ask for his signature. Franklin, though, waves him down and rushes into the pharmacy. Franklin goes inside and meets a new pharmacist who doesn't know him or his past prescription history. The pharmacist chooses to call the doctor for confirmation before giving out any medication in order to make sure everything is in order. The physician requests a conversation with Franklin in order to talk about the circumstances in person. Franklin's already stressful day takes on even more layers as a result of this unforeseen issue. Unable to locate Tony within their home, Stella becomes agitated and makes the decision to go looking for her in her car. When she finally finds Tony, she makes the decision to take her out to dinner so they can chat and exchange advice. Tony talks about how their house's mysterious reputation has made her feel alone and subjected to taunts from her peers. Stella replies, alluding to a more profound family secret and clarifying that each family member is a guardian of something important. She also gives Tony her word that she will come to understand her role at the appropriate time. Stella gets a notification that their home's alarm has gone off, cutting off their conversation abruptly. Meanwhile, the stranger returns to consciousness and identifies himself as Jude back at Franklin and Irene's house. Though he's not sure where he came from, he thinks it might be the mountains. Jude also remembers being carried, and although Franklin has no recollection of it, Irene and Franklin believe this must have been Franklin's doing. Unlike Irene, who seems concerned and eager to assist, Franklin treats Jude cautiously after returning with the Tamiflu. As Irene begins to feel lightheaded and dizzy, Franklin acts reticent and aloof, showing that her welfare is still his top priority. Cliff, a fellow student, kindly offers Denise a cup of coffee when she is having trouble staying awake during her lecture. A bond forms between the two as a result of this modest action. She told him about her family when they went out for drinks, but it wasn't totally true. She informed him that she had taken on the heavy duty of taking care of Franklin and Irene. When he questioned her father about why he couldn't finish, she dismissed him by saying he was busy. Franklin and Irene are having a heated talk in the meantime. Irene keeps a secret from Franklin regarding Dr. Maurice's advice, which Franklin confronts her about. Irene consents to the doctor's advice and requests Franklin's assistance in order to carry out her further research into the significance of the enigmatic doorway. Franklin reluctantly consents to assist her in her quest. Stella returns home with a gun after getting the alarm notification, only to find that an old friend has broken into her home. The trespasser raises the question of whether Stella is teaching Tony, implying a relationship to the same enigmatic components linked to the doorway. Jude has trouble falling asleep that night after Franklin tells him not to hurt Irene. Denise tells Cliff, just before they leave, that she lied to him during their previous conversation and shares with him her personal struggles, such as the emotional burden of her father's voluntary death when she was only 5 years old. Jude stealthily enters the house, takes Irene's letter, and leaves. His retreat to the bathroom with a knife is a startling turn in his behavior. There, he makes a small incision in his leg that exposes an odd cylindrical object embedded beneath the skin. It looks like a tracking device of some sort. Jude destroys the device with determination, making sure it is rendered useless, realizing the consequences of being followed. He deals with the device and then disappears into the night. Franklin explores the mystery surrounding the gold coins he discovered among the stranger's possessions. When he takes them to a local trader, the man recognizes them as Spanish doubloons, though it's still unclear where exactly they were mint. Stella confronts the intruder she discovered in her house at the same time. After questioning Tony about his presence, she sends him outside. In response, he hands her a document outlining the unique task and demands that she include Tony. In the meantime, Jude, the stranger who recently revealed his identity, receives a bag of clothes from Franklin when he returns home as a sign of caring. He expressly refrains from giving Jude any of Michael's possessions, though, because the memories attached to them are still extremely raw. In response to Jude's straightforward plea for food, they all go to a restaurant. Jude gets sick and throws up on the way home, which makes the outing uncomfortable. Mark, Denise's supervisor, gives her an important opportunity. She received an invitation to join a recently established research group, which comes with a significant time commitment in addition to a big pay boost. Not only would this new position advance her career, but it would also require her to manage it on top of her continuing internship, effectively increasing her workload by double. Denise is conflicted and unsure about whether to accept the offer because of the possible advantages and the unsettling possibility of more stress. As these things happen, bits and pieces of Jude's past start to come back to him. He remembers bits and pieces of his life prior to coming to live with the Yorks, including an argument with someone else. Forging signatures for his campaign, Byron draws criticism. He got a call telling him to halt his campaign so as to stay out of trouble with the law. Franklin decides to take Jude out for some male bonding at Irene's suggestion in an effort to learn more about the mysterious guest. They play chess all day, which gives Franklin plenty of opportunity to assess Jude's motivations and character. Franklin begins to have doubts about Jude despite their shared activity and comes to the conclusion that she might be a con artist. Franklin decides that Jude should leave and gives him $5,000 to help him on his way. Franklin also drives Jude to the bus station. Franklin, though, starts to regret his choice as Jude gets ready to get on the bus. Uncertainty and the intricacy of the situation prompt Franklin to grudgingly extend Jude's invitation to return, giving him another opportunity to demonstrate his sincerity and potentially explain his enigmatic relationship to their family. Among Jude's belongings at home, Irene discovers a strange orb that appears to have the power to dissolve matter. She's shocked and scared when she places it on the coffee table, and it disappears completely. Denise chooses to visit her grandparents in the meantime, and while there she meets Jude, who they introduce as their new caregiver. Given the unusual circumstances of Jude's arrival and the bizarre occurrences surrounding him, Denise has doubts about him. Irene advises Denise to go home rather than spend the night, but not before giving Jude instructions regarding her grandparents' requirements and expectations. Determined to find Jude's real identity, she decides to stay with a friend. Jude and Irene have a private discussion later that evening. He confides that he thinks it's not by accident that he's at their house. Jude declares that he is looking for his father, Gabriel, whose name appears on the previously discovered Polaroid. He asks Irene for help in this personal search. Franklin finds a bloodied knife in the bathroom, somewhere else in the house. As he cleans, he sees pieces of the enigmatic orb that Irene had discovered, now broken, coming up through the sink. Sadly, before Franklin has a chance to investigate them more, the water swiftly sweeps them away, adding to the enigma surrounding the odd object and its powers. Even after being accused of meddling in the past, Byron can't help but be drawn in by the intriguing goings-on at the Yorks' home. He enters their property covertly out of curiosity and heads for the shed. He makes his way through the mess inside until he comes to the hidden door, the very threshold that appears to be the center of all the mysteries surrounding Franklin and Irene. The focus of the story returns to Stella and Tony in the interim. Stella leads Tony to a hidden entrance behind the chapel in a scene parallel to past discoveries. It's a portal like the one in the Yorks' shed, but with a unique feature. Stella uses an odd control panel to set their destination through this doorway. Stella and Tony pass through the doorway after responding to a series of commands, and they are immediately in New York City. Jude wakes up from a nightmare that is disturbing him, in which he is fighting ferociously with another man. Feeling rattled, he chooses to take the enigmatic orb he had found earlier and bury it outside in order to preserve it. He is digging when Byron shows up and says, "This is a private area." Jude dismisses Byron's questioning, stating that he is the caregiver, and walks away without providing any more details. Franklin's misgivings about Jude, meanwhile, only grow stronger in the wake of discovering the bloody knife. Franklin goes to see Officer Thomas, intent on finding Jude's real identity, and tries to convince him to test the knife's DNA. Thomas, on the other hand, denies the necessity of taking such action, seeing Franklin's complex theories as more proof of his declining mental state. When Jude and Irene go to a library in a different part of town, Jude looks through the records and learns that his father was arrested for being homeless, and that he claimed to be amnesic at the time of his arrest. Franklin laughs teasingly at Irene's disclosure of this information, implying that Jude's forgetfulness must run in the family. Meanwhile, Stella and Tony are assisting a friend named Nick in managing their own enigmatic endeavor. He takes them to a shuttered warehouse where a device begins to emit what look like serial numbers. Nick says that although he can assist in focusing their search, he will have to go with them in order to locate the signal's exact source. Tony exhibits a persistent state of confusion and uncertainty regarding the overall objective of their mission, underscoring her difficulty in fully appreciating the magnitude of their mysterious undertaking. Staying at her friend Katie's place gives Denise a brief break from her hectic schedule. One morning when she wakes up there, she confides in a friend about the intense stress she's been experiencing lately and finds solace in talking about her problems. Tensions reach a breaking point back at Irene and Franklin's house. As the events take place, Franklin becomes more and more concerned and accuses Irene of favoring Jude over him. Franklin is filled with doubt and frustration, and he leaves the house abruptly despite Irene's best efforts to reassure him and explain her intentions. In a parallel storyline, Byron, who has been actively running for a council seat, hits a rough patch. He burns all of his campaign signs as a sign that he is giving up on politics. While doing so, he witnesses Franklin leaving in his car. Byron tries to greet and smile, but the opportunity passes quickly. Following Franklin's exit, Irene approaches Jude regarding his reticent attitude. When she worries that he won't divulge personal information, Jude gives her a wounded smile in response, showing that she cares even though he is reluctant to share. Arriving at Irene and Franklin's house under the pretense of offering her freelance services is Chandra, a nurse who used to work in the caretaker's home. She discloses that she was fired for stealing, but that she is now freelancing. Chandra requests to use the restroom after Irene tells her that Jude has assumed responsibility for the house, giving Irene her business card to give to any friends who might be in need of her services. But after her trip to the bathroom, she takes advantage of the situation and steals something from Jude in his room. In the meantime, Jude answers a call from Dale of PA Pawnbrokers, who discusses the noteworthy worth of Jude's gold coins. Jude, who is on the phone posing as Franklin's son, is clearly uncomfortable with the discussion about the coin's worth. Jude gets in touch with someone after the call, maybe to ask for guidance or details regarding the coins. The other person on the other end of the cryptic conversation says, "Fiat voluntas Dei," which means God's will be done, implying that the coins have a deeper meaning that could be philosophical or religious. Irene pays Jude for his work shortly afterward and assures him that she will always be there for him, no matter what the mysteries surrounding him may be. But following Chandra's previous visit, Jude finds something missing from his possessions, a rectangular slab that was previously mentioned. He makes the quick connection between Chandra and the theft, snatches her business card off the dresser, and goes to the neighborhood bar, probably to find her and get his stolen item back. A sequence of unexpected meetings and revelations take place at the local bar. Jude finds herself at the same bar where Denise and her friend Katie are relaxing while on the lookout for Chandra. Jude and Denise engage in a lively conversation filled with shots and dancing. Franklin unexpectedly appears to Byron in a pool hall while he is there. After they start playing pool, Byron confronts Franklin about a recent political stunt because he believes Franklin may have given the authorities information. Franklin vigorously refutes these accusations, and in spite of their chilly exchange at first, the two men come to understand one another. While Byron confides in his wife Janine, whom he refers to as a consoling prize, about his personal struggles of feeling like a second choice, Franklin confides in Irene about her feelings toward him. As their discussion goes on, both of the men, who are now very drunk, leave the bar. Here, Byron explores the mystery of the doorway and acknowledges that he might have misjudged Franklin. Byron's persistence in showing Franklin the location eventually convinces Franklin to reconsider his initial dismissal of it as just a bomb shelter. When they arrive at the ostensibly transportive shelter, though, it malfunctions, leading Byron to dismiss it as a hoax and believe it to be merely an odd construction. Concurrently, Irene awakens to discover Jude absent and resolves to take a drive in search of him. The police stop Jude as she leaves the bar while she searches. He has terrible flashbacks to an altercation in the past where he had to defend himself. As Irene drives by, she notices Jude face down on the hood of a police car being held, which explains the previously mentioned blood. She is shocked by the sight and becomes concerned for Jude's safety. Irene finds Jude in the police station, distraught that he ran away and is now involved in legal trouble. If she is to assist him, Irene begs him to be truthful and insists on the facts. When Jude does open up, it is to tell that he was detained in a remote compound intended to protect the mystery of the doorway, an enigmatic opening that leads to an uncharted extraterrestrial planet, not the symbolic portal some might think it is. Jude goes on to say that the men who attempted to stop him from leaving the compound got into a fight with him, which is why there was blood on him. The stakes are high because these people plan to kill him if they find him. Jude's ultimate goal is to find Gabriel, who entered through the same enigmatic doorway before. Irene convinces the police to release Jude using her newfound knowledge. Irene makes an effort to minimize the importance of her own doorway as they make their way home. Jude, however, maintains that their doorway is one of many important portals that are a part of a greater destiny. In the meantime, the Tony, Stella, and Nick subplot clarifies the doorway's mystical and scientific aspects. They find that invisible particles that travel great distances connect the doorways. Nick follows a scientific explanation of this phenomenon, whereas Stella sees it as a gift from God. Their search for a particular package takes them to a huge transmission tower. In order to locate the package, Nick breaches the network. Nevertheless, when a utility worker shows up, their operation is almost jeopardized. With quick thinking, Stella manages to subdue the employee, guaranteeing the continuation of their mission. Tony doesn't say anything as he and Nick travel to Illinois, where Tony is still processing what happened earlier. While they are at the doctor, Denise stops by Irene and Franklin's house with the intention of returning a jacket that Franklin left at the bar. She asks a casual question about Jude's father during her visit, and he responds in a lighthearted way. Irene returns with good news from the doctor, interrupting their conversation. Franklin gives Byron a disposable camera with undeveloped pictures on it and encourages him to have them developed as evidence, taking the initiative to demonstrate the reality of the alien landscape. Irene and Jude go to Chandra's house in a different subplot to get the object that she stole. Irene uses fake worries about Jude to divert Chandra's attention, so he sneaks upstairs and discovers the strange black trinket and a necklace that has a device similar to the one on his leg. She confronts Chandra and angrily says the things were gifts from people who work at the care facility. In an effort to learn more, Irene offers to reveal the necklace's source in exchange for keeping Chandra's secret. This information explains why Jude was so eager to destroy the tracking device in his leg and connects the necklace to the devices. After processing the pictures, Byron discovers evidence of the extraterrestrial world and takes pictures of Franklin and Irene there. Stella gains emotional depth and a deeper past when she goes through a traumatic event in the woods and has flashbacks of her mother's death. Byron's inquisitive nature prompts him to investigate conspiracy theories on the internet. It is there that he comes across a mention of the impossible door, an idea outlined by an Argentine missionary in 1723 that he associates with their enigmatic entrance. The bloody fingerprints on the control panel are identical to those at Stella's portal. As Franklin and Byron examine the area from the doorway, they discover the orb, which Jude had previously buried, is missing when they open the control panel. Byron becomes even more entangled in the mystery surrounding the doorway and its secrets when he pieces together clues from his observations in the woods to find the buried jar and retrieve the orb. Irene talks casually about teaching Jude to drive at the dinner table in the opening scene, which is tense. But Franklin doesn't seem interested in the conversation at all, and at the end he excuses himself to take out the trash. He finds a letter from Irene during this routine task, and what's in it rocks him to his core. Faced with his emotions, Franklin charges Jude with creating chaos in their house. Franklin becomes even more uneasy after Jude questions the real cause of the problems in the home, and he ends up leaving the argument. In the meantime, Tony and Stella spend the night in a motel in Illinois. When Nick brings the orb with him and plays with it carelessly in front of a hired companion, things get out of hand. Stella steps in, shoving the friend aside and telling Nick straight out that they are in danger. Speaking of Franklin's discovery of the orb, Byron, full of enthusiasm, meets up with Franklin elsewhere and cites the tragic fate of his brother as a sobering warning. But Franklin tells Byron curtly that he's busy with other things because he's too overwhelmed with his own problems. After debating it for several chapters, Denise finally makes the decision to drop out of school, which is a dramatic turn of events. When her friend has a bad reaction, Denise decides to leave and accompany Jude on his quest. Jude provides fresh information about his father Gabriel, who also had to amputate a tracker from his leg after dodging enigmatic assailants. After spending the night at Byron's, Franklin returns home and confronts Irene regarding the found letter and her alleged broken promises.
Promise me you won't think about dying until we're 100.
I promise.
The argument highlights their marriage's severe cracks and exposes a failing partnership. At the same time, Byron puts the orb in the basement shed's control panel in an effort to operationalize it. He tries, but not enough power gets through to activate the mechanism. Nick's provocative reference to Stella's late brother Caleb has heightened tensions between the two of them. Stella snaps, punching Nick and leaving him bleeding from the nose while driving off in the van, leaving him stranded at the motel. Jude makes the decision to travel by car to a distant part of Michigan, motivated by his desire to follow in his father's footsteps. Denise goes with him, excited for the adventure and the tales it might reveal. Despite Franklin's decision to stay behind, Irene chooses to go with them in search of adventure and possibly a new purpose outside of her everyday life. Franklin believes that their union and the life they created together are enough, but Irene longs for more, exposing a widening gap between their goals and desires. Franklin attends to unforeseen business concerning the Spanish doubloons while he is at home. Dale, the pawnbroker, calls him and expresses his curiosity about the provenance of these uncommon coins. Particularly considering that Jude was the one who first spoke with Dale regarding the coins, Franklin is confused. Franklin hangs up, feeling bewildered and unable to answer. It's a good interruption because Byron is calling him immediately to show him something. Byron shows Franklin where he has installed a sizable generator, the shed's basement. In an attempt to supply sufficient power to activate the doorway, he intends to charge the circuitry attaching to it. They continue with the setup, and a tremendous energy spike results from the activation. Lights flickering and birds falling from the sky are signs that the explosion sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, disrupting electrical systems and affecting the natural environment. At the same time, Tony and Stella, who have been monitoring similar anomalies, get a pinpoint ping on their devices that tells them where to go. The power-up succeeds, propelled by the energy surge from the basement doorway of the shed, and Franklin and Byron find themselves in the alien perspective. A stunningly gorgeous view greets them, standing in sharp contrast to the ordinary world they have left behind. Grounded in a sense of wonder and awe at the bizarre encounter, Byron says he wants to go deeper. Franklin, who had previously expressed fear about such experiences, now acknowledges that he is no longer afraid. Franklin has achieved a major personal milestone at this time, demonstrating his willingness to take risks. Franklin shows Byron the spacesuits he has been creating for years, but has never had the guts to wear. Motivated, Byron promises to assist in putting them to use. While all of this is going on, Irene, Jude, and Denise arrive in Michigan and go to live with Hannah. Hannah recognizes Gabriel from a Polaroid. Hannah reveals that although she and Gabriel were once romantically involved, he vanished from sight 15 years ago. Irene thinks that their trip might be in vain and she wants to go back, but Hannah talks them into staying the night. Hannah reassures Irene that the noise upstairs is nothing to be concerned about when she hears it later that evening. Hannah makes contact with Franklin after Paul plays a voicemail he left regarding the coins, leading her to enter a hidden room where a man named Paul is listening in on everything they talk about. Byron stays home and works with Franklin on his project, ignoring Janine's barbecue. In a heated exchange, Janine acknowledges that she reported Byron's campaign forgery because she wanted a simpler life, highlighting the significant gap in their goals. Feeling pushed aside, Denise approaches Irene. Irene confesses that she feels guilty about Michael's previous hardships and feels unworthy of Denise's love. Irene, overcome with emotion, apologizes and they embrace deeply, learning more about each other through memories of Michael's depression. Stella confirms that Jude is the apostate they have been searching for when Tony discovers a video of Jude doing karaoke. In order to follow Jude's path, Tony gives Nick a call. Franklin and Byron test the spacesuits they have been developing on a different front. Excitedly exploring the alien landscape, Byron talks back to Franklin until he stops talking, declaring that he has discovered something amazing. Alone and troubled by his guilt and worry over Byron's abrupt absence, Franklin fears the worst. Irene shows Denise around the shelter and explains the chaos she's been going through. She says that she found it difficult to find a purpose for her life after Michael's voluntary death, and that she was hoping the portal would help her get over her loss. Irene acknowledges that her goal was to keep Denise safe from the complicated workings of the portal, but that things have gotten out of hand since Jude showed up. Denise is upset by the revelations and leaves feeling deceived. Stella and Tony come across Chandra and a menacing man on the beach in the meantime. The man offers information about Jude in return for gold doubloons. The man quickly kills Chandra, gets what he needs, takes the doubloons, and threatens to make sure Stella stays strong. From a distance, Tony witnesses the horrific scene as he sets Chandra's car on fire. Jude becomes alarmed upon discovering the orb has vanished from the garden. Franklin, meanwhile, looks for Byron on the observatory deck but is unable to locate him, which distresses both of them. Concerned, Janine asks Franklin where her husband is, but he reassures her without providing any details. Jude confronts Franklin inside about the risks involved in their project, letting him know that the alien planet is nothing more than wasteland. Tony and Stella talk about their situation, with Stella acknowledging that they are unable to flee the man who is after them. The man tells Tony that Caleb is Stella's father and not her brother as he shows him around the York residence, noting that dead birds indicate when they are about to die. Tony arrives at the garden to find Franklin compelled inside at gunpoint. Stella opens fire, sending Jude running into the woods. When Denise gets back to the York residence, her grandparents and herself are both being held at gunpoint. After forcing Irene to disclose the location of the doorway, the stranger goes to the shed. Irene consoles a shaken Tony, who questions their purpose and feels that what they've done is wrong, pointing out that Chandra's passing runs directly counter to their purportedly divine mission. The stranger changes his mind and tells Stella, leveraging the family to get Jude, the apostate, into custody. Jude is attacked by the man when he gets there. It's implied that she sent him, but the specifics are still unclear. Franklin subdues the stranger during a brawl. He is subsequently bound, tasered, and gagged. Driven away with a new bargaining chip, Stella and Tony leave their old lives behind, the captive in tow. Jude and Denise decide to separate from the chaos at the same time by going through the doorway to Bangkok. Franklin accepts Irene's decision to curtail their use of the mysterious doorway, dismissing its once considered potential with a mixture of relief and determination to settle outstanding matters pertaining to Byron's fate. Tension rises as Hannah and her cronies ambush Stella and Tony and drive them off the road. The argument gets more heated when Hannah approaches the bound stranger, Cornelius. The couple leaves for an unidentified alien planet in the interim, but Franklin loses consciousness as a result of a system malfunction involving his oxygen supply. Fearlessly trailing behind him, Irene bravely enters the foreign environment without a spacesuit to support him. It turns out that this planet's atmosphere is conducive to human life. After she takes off her husband's helmet, they find an old city over the hill. Apparently, humans have had guardians here for roughly 100,000 years. On Earth and numerous other planets, they are the ones who constructed hundreds of quantum portals. The first season concludes here. Regretfully, the show was canceled, leaving us with only a setup for the second season.